The night began with a cruel illusion of peace. Inside the glittering halls of the Whitmore estate, chandeliers sparkled like frozen stars, and waiters drifted gracefully across marble floors. Guests in designer gowns and black suits laughed, glasses clinked, and the hum of violins floated through the air. To anyone looking from the outside, it seemed like the perfect evening. But beneath the shine and music, shadows of betrayal and danger slithered quietly. Hannah walked slowly down the staircase, one hand resting on her swollen belly. 6 months pregnant, she had chosen a soft blue gown that flowed gently over her figure. She smiled politely as guests congratulated her, but inside she carried unease. Her husband, Michael, the powerful billionaire everyone admired, had been distant. He avoided her eyes, always distracted, always rushing away with excuses. She wanted to believe it was only work, but a woman's intuition whispers louder than applause. From across the room, another woman watched Hannah descend. Lisa. Her hair glowed red under the chandelier light. Her lips curved into a smile too sweet to be true. Most of the guests believed Lisa was a trusted family friend, but in her eyes burned a hunger that no friendship could hide. Lisa wasn't here to celebrate Hannah. She was here to destroy her. Michael, Hannah whispered as she reached her husband's side. He kissed her cheek lightly, but his eyes flickered nervously toward Lisa. Hannah noticed, her heart tightening like a fist. Before she could ask, Michael excused himself, leaving her standing alone among strangers. Lisa slid in like poison wrapped in silk. You look radiant tonight, Hannah, she purred. Pregnancy suits you, though it must be exhausting. Her words dripped with honey, but the glance in her eyes was sharp as a knife. Hannah forced a smile. Thank you. I'm fine. But she wasn't fine. She felt the coldness in Michael's touch, the way Lisa lingered near him, and the whispers among guests who glanced at her belly, then quickly looked away. The orchestra swelled. The master of ceremonies announced a special performance for the night, a ritual of walking across burning coals, a symbol of eternal love and courage. Applause filled the hall. Hannah's stomach dropped. Who would agree to such madness in the middle of a gala? Then the spotlight turned toward her. Mrs. Whitmore, the MC declared with a grin, would you honor us by proving the strength of your love tonight? The crowd cheered, chanting her name. Michael began to rise as if to stop it, but Lisa grabbed Hannah's hand with false warmth. Come on, darling, she urged, eyes glittering with malice. Show them you're brave. Hannah shook her head, frightened, but the voices around her grew louder. Do it. Do it. Champagne glasses clinked, cameras lifted, and in that suffocating moment, she felt cornered. Then, with a subtle twist of her wrist, Lisa pulled Hannah forward toward the glowing pit of burning coals. The fire hissed, sparks rising like hungry demons, and in that instant, everyone's breath caught, because what happened next would change their lives forever. The morning sun had not yet risen when Hannah opened her eyes. Her body ached from the weight of her growing child, but it wasn't only pregnancy pressing down on her. It was the silence. The silence of a house too large, too cold, and too empty of warmth. Michael's side of the bed was untouched, the sheets smooth. He had come home late again. Or perhaps not at all. Hannah didn't even know anymore. She rubbed her belly gently, whispering, It's just you and me, little one. We'll be okay. The baby kicked faintly, a small reminder that she was not completely alone. Downstairs, the kitchen buzzed with staff preparing breakfast. Silver trays clattered, coffee brewed, and fresh bread filled the air. Yet Hannah felt like a guest, not the lady of the house. When she entered, conversations hushed. Servants bowed, their eyes filled with pity, then quickly turned away. She poured herself tea, but her hands shook. Was it hormones, or was it the fear she couldn't name? She longed for her mother's embrace, the comfort of the modest home, where love mattered more than money. But Michael had built walls of luxury that often felt like prisons. Later that day, she visited the school where she once taught. Children rushed to her, hugging her belly, their laughter ringing like music. For a brief moment, Hannah felt alive again. Her friend Mia, a fellow teacher, pulled her aside. You look pale. Are you really okay? Hannah forced a smile. Just tired. Michael's busy. You know how it is. Mia frowned. Busy or distracted? People talk, Hannah. I've heard things. The words struck like a dart. Hannah's smile faltered, but she shook her head. Don't, please. I can't handle rumors. Mia sighed, hugging her tightly. You deserve honesty, Hannah. Remember that. That night, Michael finally appeared, his suit still smelling of cologne not his own. He greeted her with a distracted kiss on the forehead. Big day tomorrow. The gala's important. Hannah searched his eyes, but he avoided her gaze. Michael, are you hiding something from me? She whispered. He froze for a second too long before forcing a smile. No, darling. Just business. Always business. Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, but her heart screamed otherwise. Before bed, Hannah sat by the nursery they had prepared. Tiny clothes hung neatly, stuffed animals lined the shelves, a cradle waited quietly. She placed her hand on the wooden frame and whispered again to her child, "No matter what happens, I'll protect you. I'll protect us." But even as she spoke, tears rolled down her face. She wiped them quickly, afraid of her own weakness. She didn't know that danger was already closing in. She didn't know that tomorrow night, every hidden truth would explode into flames. And she didn't know the woman who smiled sweetly in public was already plotting her destruction. Lisa sat in front of her vanity, painting her lips the color of blood. The mirror reflected a woman who looked flawless, but her beauty hid something rotten. Behind her smile lived bitterness, envy, and a hunger that never seemed satisfied. She remembered the nights with Michael, whispered promises in hotel rooms, the illusion that she had finally won him. But then he pulled away. He stopped answering calls, stopped showing up. He returned to his wife, to Hannah. The thought of it made Lisa's hands tremble with rage. No. She hissed to her reflection. She doesn't get to keep him, not her. Lisa's phone buzzed. A message from the event planner read, "Stage is ready, Cole performance confirmed." Her lips curved into a smile. This was the chance. The gala wasn't just a party, it was her battlefield. And tonight she would end Hannah's place in Michael's life forever. Later that afternoon, Lisa walked briskly through the Whitmore estate, heels clicking on polished floors. Staff greeted her politely, unaware of her true intentions. She carried a box, tied with a silk ribbon. Inside were shoes, designer heels with soles so smooth that anyone wearing them would struggle to keep balance. "These will look perfect on Hannah," Lisa whispered, handing the box to a maid. "Tell her it's a gift from Michael's business partner. For good luck tonight." The maid nodded, unsuspecting, and disappeared toward Hannah's room. Lisa then met with the performance crew outside in the garden, where the fiery pit was being prepared. Black stones lined the edges and glowing embers crackled with heat. She slipped cash into a stagehand's pocket. "Make sure she's the one they call up. Encourage the crowd. Cheer her name. Understand?" The man hesitated. "She's pregnant, miss. This isn't safe." Lisa's eyes turned cold. "Do what I said, or I'll find someone who will." Fear flashed in his eyes. He nodded quickly. By evening, the stage was set. The coals glowed like the mouth of hell. Guests would cheer, thinking it was harmless entertainment. But Lisa knew better. One stumble, one push, and Hannah would fall into fire. Back in her room, Lisa slipped into a crimson gown that hugged her figure like flames. She studied herself again in the mirror. Every detail was perfect. Makeup, hair, smile. No one would suspect that beneath this beauty lurked murder. She raised her glass of wine in a silent toast to her reflection. Tonight, the world will see who deserves to stand beside Michael. And it won't be her. In her mind, the plan unfolded flawlessly. Hannah would trip, fall into the burning coals, and chaos would erupt. Michael, devastated, would turn back to the only woman left. And with Hannah gone, no one could stop Lisa from stepping into wealth, status, and the title of Mrs. Whitmore. But fate has a way of twisting plans. Lisa didn't know that her every move would soon be exposed, and that the fire she prepared for Hannah would become the fire that burned her life to ashes. And tomorrow night, the stage would light up, not with glory, but with screams. Michael sat in his office, staring at the glowing city skyline through glass walls. The empire he built, companies, investments, charities, was admired by the world. People called him a genius, a visionary. But tonight, sitting alone with a glass of untouched whiskey, he felt like a fraud. On his desk lay a photograph. Hannah, smiling sweetly, holding up the first ultrasound image of their baby. Michael picked it up, his hand trembling. He wanted to be proud, to feel joy, but guilt wrapped itself around his throat. Because behind Hannah's smile, he knew there was a shadow named Lisa. His mistake haunted him. He had let loneliness and temptation blind him. Lisa had been there, whispering admiration when Hannah was busy teaching, building him up when he felt weak. For a time, he believed the lie, that he could have both worlds. But when Hannah announced her pregnancy, reality struck. Michael cut ties with Lisa. At least, he tried to. Now Lisa's presence at the gala gnawed at his nerves. He knew she wouldn't give up quietly, yet he said nothing to Hannah. He convinced himself silence was protection, that Hannah didn't need the burden of betrayal while carrying their child. But silence can be deadlier than lies. The door creaked open. Hannah stepped into his office, her soft blue dress flowing around her. She carried tea on a small tray, placing it beside his untouched whiskey. "You've been working late every night," she said gently. "You look tired." Michael forced a smile. "Just the gala. Everything has to be perfect." She studied his face, her eyes filled with quiet suspicion. "Michael, is there something you're not telling me?" For a split second, the truth rose in his throat. He wanted to confess, to beg forgiveness, to promise that Lisa meant nothing, but the image of Hannah collapsing from stress of their baby suffering stopped him. He swallowed the words. "No, darling," he whispered. "It's just business." Her shoulders relaxed slightly, though doubt still lingered in her eyes. She kissed his cheek and left the room, her footsteps soft against the marble floor. Michael turned back to the window, his chest tight with shame. He had lied again, not with words but with silence, and he knew silence would not save them. That night, as he dressed for the gala, Michael's reflection stared back with judgment. His tuxedo was flawless, but his eyes betrayed the storm inside. He adjusted his cufflinks, rehearsing lines of gratitude for donors, speeches about legacy and innovation. Yet all he could think about was Hannah, and Lisa's piercing stare across the ballroom. He told himself he would protect Hannah if anything happened. He told himself he still had control. But deep inside, Michael knew the truth. He had already lost control the moment he chose silence over honesty. And when the music swelled at the gala, that silence would explode into a nightmare no one could stop. The Whitmore estate glowed like a palace that evening. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbows across marble walls, and a red carpet stretched from the gates to the grand staircase. Limousines arrived one after another, releasing donors, politicians, and celebrities. Flashbulbs from the press burst like fireworks. Inside, the ballroom shimmered. Tables draped in white silk were crowned with golden roses. A live orchestra played, filling the air with elegance. To the world, it was a night of celebration, an evening to showcase the wealth and power of Michael Whitmore. But beneath the glamour, hidden tensions coiled like snakes. Hannah walked beside Michael, her hand resting gently on his arm. She wore the soft blue gown Michael had chosen, though it felt more like armor than beauty. Every step she took was met with whispers. Women eyed her belly, men glanced at Michael with envy. Cameras flashed, but Hannah felt none of the glory. At the main table, family awaited. Evelyn, Michael's mother, rose to greet them, her smile tight, her eyes sharp. "You're glowing, Hannah," she said coolly. "Pregnancy has softened your features." It sounded like a compliment, but Hannah felt the sting beneath it. Grace, her own mother, bristled. "My daughter has always been beautiful, inside and out." The two women exchanged a polite smile, but the air chilled. Across the table, Richard, Michael's father, tapped his glass for silence. "Let's keep tonight about unity. Our family stands at the center of this empire. Let's not forget that." Hannah lowered her gaze, wishing only for peace. She rubbed her belly as her baby kicked gently, reminding her to stay calm. Then, like perfume drifting into a room, Lisa appeared. She wore a crimson gown that clung to her like fire, her hair blazing under chandelier light. Gasps rippled through the guests. To most, she was Michael's charming business associate, invited to strengthen ties. To Hannah, she was simply wrong, too close, too radiant, too comfortable. Lisa leaned down, kissing Evelyn's cheek as though she belonged at the family table. "You look divine tonight," she purred. Her eyes flicked briefly toward Hannah, sparkling with hidden cruelty. Michael shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. His silence struck Hannah harder than any words. She forced herself to smile, though her heart cracked a little deeper. As the orchestra swelled, waiters poured champagne into crystal flutes. Toasts were made to Michael's success, to the new baby on the way, to the family's bright future. Cameras snapped, recording every glittering second. Yet Hannah couldn't shake the unease curling in her stomach. She noticed Lisa whispering to the event planner, her eyes darting toward the stage at the far end of the hall. She noticed the way certain guests, strangers to her, watched her too closely, as if waiting. Mia, her closest friend, leaned across the table. "Stay close to me tonight," she whispered. "Something feels off." Hannah nodded, but fear already tugged at her chest. She didn't know that Lisa's plan was already in motion. She didn't know that before the night ended, the glittering ballroom would erupt into chaos. And she didn't know the fire waiting at the center of the gala was meant to consume her. The orchestra fell silent. The lights dimmed. A hush swept over the ballroom as the master of ceremonies, a tall man in a glittering suit, strode across the stage with a wide grin. His voice boomed through the speakers, carrying excitement that seemed almost theatrical. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "tonight we bring you something extraordinary. A symbol of courage, loyalty, and eternal love. A test that has been celebrated for centuries. The walk across burning coals." Gasps and applause erupted. Guests leaned forward eagerly, champagne glasses trembling with anticipation. The stagehands rolled in a long rectangular pit lined with glowing embers, their orange flames crackling ominously. The heat reached the front rows, causing women to fan themselves with programs. Hannah froze, her eyes widened in disbelief. Burning coals? At a charity gala? This was madness. She looked to Michael, searching for an explanation, but his face paled. His hand twitched as though he wanted to stop it, yet he remained seated, trapped by his own silence. Beside him, Lisa smiled sweetly, her crimson gown shimmering like fire itself. She clapped her hands elegantly, whispering just loud enough for Hannah to hear. "How exciting! The perfect chance to show the world how strong your marriage really is." Hannah's stomach twisted. Something wasn't right. The performance felt less like entertainment and more like a trap. The MC's voice thundered again, and who better to honor this tradition than our beloved hostess, Mrs. Hannah Whitmore? A woman carrying the future of this family, a shining example of devotion. All at once, the crowd erupted into cheers. "Hannah, Hannah." The chant rolled like thunder, fueled by voices strategically planted among the guests, voices Lisa had paid to stir the frenzy. Hannah shook her head, panic rising. She placed her hand protectively over her belly. "I can't, I'm pregnant." But her protest drowned beneath the roar of applause. Glasses clinked, cameras flashed, and the crowd pushed harder. "Do it! Show your love! Walk the fire for Michael!" Michael half rose from his chair, his lips parting. He wanted to speak, to stop this madness. But before he could, Evelyn, his mother, pressed her manicured hand on his arm. "It's only symbolic," she said coldly. "Let her prove her strength. The press will adore it." Hannah's heart pounded. Every instinct screamed danger. She turned to Michael one last time, her eyes begging him to protect her. But he remained frozen, his silence cutting deeper than any blade. Then Lisa's hand slid into hers. "Don't be afraid, darling," she purred, pulling gently yet firmly toward the stage. "I'll guide you." Hannah tried to resist, but the pressure of the crowd, the force of Lisa's grip, and the blinding lights left her trapped. Step by step, she was dragged closer to the pit. The heat licked at her skin, sparks rising like tiny demons. The MC spread his arms dramatically. "Behold, the flames of love. Tonight, Mrs. Whitmore will show us her courage." The audience cheered wildly. But to Hannah, the roar of voices sounded like the roar of fire itself. And with Lisa tightening her hold, Hannah realized this was not a performance. It was a setup, a deadly setup. The pit of coals glowed hotter with every second. Flames licked at the air, the heat so intense that even guests in the front row fanned their faces. The orchestra's instruments trembled in their players' hands, uncertain whether this was truly part of the evening. Hannah stood at the edge, her body trembling. The roar of the crowd blurred into a deafening storm. Her hand clutched her belly, shielding the child within her. "I can't," she whispered desperately, tears forming in her eyes. "I can't do this." But Lisa's grip on her wrist tightened like iron. With a smile that masked venom, Lisa leaned in and hissed, "Yes, you can. Or rather, you must." Before Hannah could pull back, Lisa gave her a sudden shove. Hannah gasped as her foot slipped on the smooth sole of the shoes Lisa had given her. She stumbled forward, arms flailing, and then the world became fire. Her gown brushed the burning coals, catching in an instant. The smell of fabric scorching filled the hall, followed by the sickening scent of flesh. Screams erupted. Guests leapt to their feet, horrified, some dropping their glasses as flames burst upward. "Hannah!" Michael's voice tore through the chaos. He lunged from his seat, but too late. Hannah collapsed onto the embers, her legs and arm engulfed in fire. Her scream pierced the ballroom, raw and primal, the sound of a soul being torn apart. She thrashed, trying to roll away, but the silk of her dress fed the flames. Sparks flew upward as the crowd panicked, some rushing forward, others frozen in terror. Michael ripped off his tuxedo jacket and leapt into the pit, throwing himself over Hannah. He smothered the fire with his body, beating at the flames with his hands. His skin burned, but he didn't care. He pulled her up, her skin blistered, her face pale with shock. Gasps filled the air as they saw her. Hannah's once glowing beauty was now covered in blackened fabric, her skin red and raw. She clutched her belly, sobbing, her voice broken. My baby, my baby." Lisa stepped back, feigning horror. "It was an accident," she cried, her voice dripping with false innocence. She tripped, she fell. But her eyes betrayed her. Michael saw it, a flicker of satisfaction, quickly hidden, but not fast enough. Rage filled him. He wanted to scream, to strike, but Hannah's limp body in his arms pulled him back. "Call an ambulance," he roared, his voice echoing like thunder. "Now!" Staff rushed forward. Guests scrambled for phones. The MC stood frozen, his microphone dangling uselessly. Evelyn covered her mouth. Richard cursed under his breath. Grace pushed past security, falling to her knees beside her daughter. "Hannah! Hold on, baby, hold on!" Michael lifted Hannah into his arms, her burned skin sticking to his jacket, his tears falling onto her face. Her eyes fluttered weakly, whispering only one word. "Why?" It cut him deeper than the fire ever could. As paramedics burst into the hall, chaos reigned. Lisa shrank into the shadows, pretending to cry. But in the corner of the room, David appeared, his eyes blazing with fury, his hand gripping the hilt of a stage-prop sword. And with Hannah's screams still echoing, David knew this was no accident. This was attempted murder. The ballroom was in chaos. Guests screamed, chairs toppled, glasses shattered on the marble floor. The pit of burning coals still hissed, the acrid smoke rising toward the chandeliers. Michael held Hannah tightly in his arms, her body limp, her skin blistered, her cries growing weaker with every second. Then the doors to the ballroom burst open. David stormed in, his broad frame cutting through the panicked crowd. His military instincts kicked in the moment he saw the fire, the injured, and the trembling guests. His eyes locked on Hannah, her face pale, her body broken. His heart stopped. "Hannah?" His voice thundered across the hall. He rushed forward, but his eyes caught something else. Lisa, standing just a little too far back, her crocodile tears failing to mask the flicker of triumph in her eyes. In that instant, David knew. He didn't need proof. He didn't need words. He saw guilt, satisfaction, and evil written across her face. He grabbed the nearest object, a stage prop, a ceremonial sword meant only for display. But in David's hand, it became justice. The crowd parted instinctively as he raised the weapon, pointing it directly at Lisa. "You tried to kill my sister." His voice cut through the screaming, sharp as steel. Gasps filled the room. Cameras whipped around, recording every second. Lisa's face drained of color, though she quickly composed herself, pressing a hand to her chest. "What?" "No, it was an accident," she tripped. "Liar!" David roared, advancing. His eyes burned with fury, his grip steady. "I'll carve the truth out of you if I have to." Michael struggled to hold Hannah, torn between rushing to the ambulance and protecting his wife's honor. Hannah whimpered softly, her body shaking in his arms. Grace and Tom, her parents, clung to each other, sobbing as Evelyn and Richard stood frozen, ashamed and powerless. "David, stop!" Michael shouted, his voice raw. "We need to get her to the hospital." David's chest heaved, the sword still aimed at Lisa. Every muscle in him screamed for vengeance. But then he saw Hannah's fragile form, her breath shallow, her baby's life hanging in the balance. Justice could wait, life could not. He lowered the blade, pointing it at the ground, but his eyes never left Lisa. "This isn't over," he growled. "I'll make sure the world knows what you've done." Paramedics rushed in at last, wheeling a stretcher. Michael gently laid Hannah down, his hands trembling as they secured her with straps. She let out a weak moan, her hand twitching toward her belly. "Her vitals are unstable," one paramedic barked. "We need to move now." David stepped aside, gripping the sword until his knuckles turned white. As the stretcher rolled past, he leaned close to Hannah. I'm here, little sister. I won't let them hurt you again. The paramedics pushed through the crowd, clearing a path toward the waiting ambulance. Guests, shaken and horrified, whispered among themselves. Phones recorded every angle, broadcasting the scandal live across the city. Lisa shrank back into the shadows, her mask of innocence cracking. For the first time, fear flickered in her eyes. Not of Michael, not of the law, but of David, who now stalked her like a predator watching prey. And as the ambulance doors slammed shut, one truth was clear. Hannah's fight for life had just begun, and Lisa's reckoning was inevitable. The ambulance roared through the city, sirens splitting the night. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of burned flesh and antiseptic. Hannah lay strapped to the stretcher, her skin blistered, her breath shallow and uneven. Her swollen belly rose and fell with terrifying irregularity. "Pulse is dropping," one paramedic shouted, pressing a mask over Hannah's face. "We're losing her." Michael sat beside her, gripping her hand, his own suit scorched from the fire. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "Stay with me, Hannah. Please. Don't leave me. Don't leave our baby." Hannah's eyelids fluttered. Her lips trembled as she whispered a single word. "Why?" The sound sliced through Michael's chest like a blade. He bent over her hand, sobbing silently, unable to answer. The ambulance doors swung open as they arrived at the hospital. Doctors and nurses rushed out, wheeling Hannah through the emergency entrance. Grace and Tom arrived moments later, clinging to each other, their faces pale with fear. David followed, still gripping the sword, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with rage. Inside the operating theater, chaos unfolded. A team of specialists surrounded Hannah, calling out numbers, attaching monitors, and preparing IV drips. The fetal heart monitor beeped faintly, then stuttered. "Fetal distress." A nurse shouted, "We could lose the baby if we don't stabilize her now." Michael pressed his hands to the glass window outside the operating room, his entire body trembling. "Save them," he whispered hoarsely. "Save them both." David stood beside him, silent but seething. "If she doesn't make it, Michael, I swear." He stopped, his voice breaking. "You should have protected her." Michael turned, his face streaked with tears. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself if she—" His words collapsed into sobs. Inside, the doctors worked furiously. They applied cooling wraps to Hannah's burns, started fluids, and monitored her vitals. The beeping of machines filled the room, each sound pulling her closer or further from life. Then the heart monitor spiked, then dipped again. The room froze. The lead doctor barked orders. "Prepare for emergency C-section if her vitals crash. We can't risk both lives." Grace collapsed into a chair in the waiting room, her hands pressed together in prayer. "Please, God," she whispered, "don't take my daughter, don't take my grandchild." Evelyn and Richard arrived, their faces grim, weighed down by guilt and shame. Evelyn reached out to Grace, but Grace pulled away, her eyes blazing. "Your family let this happen. My daughter is fighting for her life because of you." The words cut deep, but Evelyn had none to defend herself. She bowed her head, silent. Minutes felt like hours. Every alarm inside the operating room jolted the waiting family. Finally, the doctor emerged, pulling down his mask, his expression grave. "She's stable, for now," he said. "The baby is holding on, but the burns are severe. She'll need multiple surgeries. It's going to be a long fight." Michael staggered back against the wall, his chest heaving with relief and terror all at once. David clenched his fists, vowing silently that Lisa would pay. And as Hannah lay unconscious, her body broken, the true war for justice had only just begun. The hospital corridors buzzed with urgency, doctors and nurses rushing in and out of rooms, wheels squeaking against polished floors. But outside Hannah's room, time seemed frozen. Michael sat slumped in a chair, his hands covering his face. Grace prayed quietly, Tom pacing beside her. David stood like a sentinel at the door, his arms crossed, the sword from the gala still clutched in his grip. Then came the sound of heels clicking. Slow, confident. Lisa appeared at the end of the hallway, her crimson gown now wrinkled but still burning bright under the fluorescent lights. Her hair was perfectly in place, her expression carefully crafted into one of concern. She carried a bouquet of white lilies, the picture of false innocence. Michael shot up instantly, his eyes dark with rage. "Get out." Lisa tilted her head, feigning shock. "I only came to check on Hannah. After all, what happened tonight was such a terrible accident." "Accident?" David thundered, stepping forward, the sword gleaming under the hospital lights. You pushed her into the fire. I saw it in your eyes. Say accident again and I swear. David, Michael barked, holding him back. But his gaze never left Lisa. His voice dropped to a growl. You don't belong here. Lisa's eyes flickered with something darker before she smiled sweetly. Michael, darling, you're upset. Anyone would be. But think about how this looks. People saw her fall. They'll say she was careless, maybe even unstable. Do you really want the world to believe the mother of your child is reckless? Grace gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. How dare you, she snapped. My daughter is fighting for her life, and you stand here twisting the knife? Lisa's smile hardened. I'm just saying. Reputations are fragile. Michael has so much to lose. David lunged again, but Michael grabbed his arm, his voice trembling with fury. Don't give her what she wants. She thrives on chaos. Lisa took a daring step closer, lowering her voice. Michael, you and I both know the truth. We had something real. You told me Hannah could never understand you the way I do. Don't let one mistake erase what we shared. The words struck like daggers. Grace turned on Michael, her eyes filled with betrayal. Is this true? Michael's face crumbled. He couldn't lie anymore. His silence screamed louder than any confession. Lisa's smile widened, sensing her power. She leaned in closer to Michael, her voice honeyed but venomous. She'll never forgive you, but I will. Leave her. Choose me. A sudden crack echoed through the hall. David had slammed the sword against the wall, sparks flying from the metal. His voice was ice. If you don't walk away right now, Lisa, I swear you'll regret it. Finally, a nurse rushed over, her voice sharp. This is a hospital, not a battlefield. Leave now or I'll call security. Lisa adjusted her gown, her eyes narrowing. She leaned toward Michael one last time, whispering, You'll come back to me. You always do. Then she turned and walked away, her heels clicking like gunshots. Michael stood frozen, shame burning his face. Grace sobbed quietly. Tom put an arm around her, and David glared down the hall where Lisa disappeared. And in the silence that followed, Hannah's betrayal was no longer hidden. It was now an open wound. The waiting room felt like a prison. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, and the sterile smell of disinfectant filled the air. Beyond the double doors, Hannah lay unconscious, machines breathing for her, doctors monitoring every fragile heartbeat. But outside, the people who claimed to love her were tearing each other apart. Grace sat hunched in her chair, her rosary clutched tightly in her hands. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered prayers. Beside her, Tom paced like a caged lion, his fists clenched, his eyes fixed on Michael. You were supposed to protect her, Tom growled, his voice breaking. Instead, you let your mistress humiliate her in front of the world. And now my daughter is lying in there, burned, broken, because of you. Michael flinched, the words cut deeper than the flames ever could. I never wanted this, he whispered, his voice shaking. I ended things with Lisa. I thought it was over. Ended things? Grace snapped, her voice sharp with fury. She rose from her chair, pointing a trembling finger at him. You betrayed your wife. You betrayed your unborn child. Don't stand here and talk about what you thought. You destroyed her trust. Evelyn, Michael's mother, finally spoke, her tone cold and defensive. Enough. My son made a mistake. Yes, but Hannah is still his wife. This family must stand united in times of crisis. Airing dirty laundry helps no one. Grace turned on her, her eyes blazing. United? Don't you dare speak of unity. While you were busy protecting your precious reputation, my daughter was being dragged into fire. If you had lifted a finger, if you had told your son to act like a husband, she wouldn't be fighting for her life right now. The room went silent for a heartbeat. Then Richard, Michael's father, stood, his deep voice rumbling like thunder. Grace, Tom, you have every right to be angry, but let's not forget, this scandal doesn't just touch your daughter, it touches all of us. The Whitmore name, our company, our legacy. David cut him off, stepping forward, his voice hard as steel. Legacy? She's in there bleeding, burned, and you're worried about a family name? To hell with your legacy. Hannah is my sister. If she doesn't make it out of that room, I swear your empire won't stand another day. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Evelyn gasped, clutching her pearls. Richard glared at David, but the fire in the young man's eyes dared him to respond. Michael buried his face in his hands. The weight of his silence, his betrayal, and his cowardice pressed down on him, until he could barely breathe. He wanted to scream, to beg forgiveness, but every word he tried to form dissolved in his throat. A doctor finally entered, his scrubs stained with sweat, his mask pulled down. "She's stable for the moment," he said. "But the next 24 hours are critical. We'll know more after surgery." Everyone exhaled, but relief was fragile. Grace collapsed back into her chair, clutching her rosary tighter. Tom's fists slowly loosened. David's glare never left Michael. And in that fragile silence, one truth remained unshakable. Hannah's survival might heal her body, but the wounds in this family were only beginning to bleed. While Hannah lay unconscious in the burn unit, the hospital corridors echoed with whispers. The media had already caught wind of the tragedy. Headlines flashed across phone screens. "Billionaire's wife severely burned in gala fire performance." Photos of Hannah being carried out of the flames spread like wildfire. But buried within the chaos was the truth, Lisa's hand in the disaster. And one man was determined to bring that truth to light. Carlos Vega, Michael's longtime attorney, sat in a quiet corner of the hospital lobby, his laptop open, phone pressed to his ear. Known for his sharp mind and relentless pursuit of justice, Carlos was not a man who believed in coincidences. He had been at the gala, and he had seen the moment Hannah slipped. Too clean, too deliberate. "Send me the surveillance footage from the main ballroom," he ordered a security manager over the phone. "Every angle, every camera, and check backups. I don't care if someone already tampered with it, I want the raw files." He ended the call, typing furiously. Michael approached, his face pale, exhaustion etched into every line. "Carlos, I can't lose her," he said, his voice breaking. "Tell me you'll make Lisa pay." Carlos looked up, his eyes sharp. "I'll do more than that. I'll make sure the world knows exactly what she did. But I need your full cooperation. No secrets, no hesitation. If you've been covering for her, if there's anything I don't know, it will come back to haunt us." Michael swallowed hard, guilt flashing across his face. "There was something between us. It ended months ago. I swear." Carlos's jaw tightened. "That's exactly the kind of information Lisa will twist. We'll need to get ahead of it. If she spins the narrative, she'll make Hannah look unstable, and you look complicit." At that moment, David stormed into the lobby, his fists clenched. "Why are we even wasting time talking? She tried to murder my sister. Put her in prison." Carlos stood calmly, his voice steady but firm. "And we will. But courts don't run on anger. They run on evidence. We need proof, undeniable proof, or she'll slip through the cracks and claim it was all an accident." David glared but said nothing. Deep down, he knew Carlos was right. An hour later, a flash drive arrived from the estate security team. Carlos inserted it into his laptop, opening the files. One by one, the surveillance angles appeared on the screen. At first, the footage looked chaotic. Flames, smoke, screaming guests. But then Carlos slowed it down. Frame by frame, he watched Lisa's hand tighten around Hannah's wrist, her subtle push forward, her calculated retreat when the fire caught. "There," Carlos said coldly. "That's no accident, that's intent." Michael leaned over his shoulder, his face pale. "God, she really did it." David's eyes blazed. "Now we take her down." Carlos copied the footage onto multiple drives, securing them in his case. He looked at both men, his tone resolute. "This is enough to open an investigation, but it's only the beginning. We'll need witnesses, financial records, and testimony from staff. Lisa won't go down quietly. She'll fight, and she'll drag every skeleton in this family's closet into the light if she has to." The men exchanged grim looks. For Michael, it meant his betrayal might soon be public knowledge. For David, it meant more waiting when vengeance boiled in his veins. And for Hannah, still unconscious, her body fighting to heal, justice was being built piece by piece, even as danger lingered in the shadows. The hospital room was quiet, save for the steady rhythm of machines. The soft beep of the heart monitor and the hiss of oxygen filled the silence. Hannah lay still beneath white sheets, her body wrapped in layers of bandages. Her face, once radiant, was pale and drawn. Then her eyelids fluttered. Slowly, painfully, she opened her eyes. The light stabbed at her, and for a moment she wished she could sink back into the darkness. But the pain in her body reminded her she was alive. Alive, but broken. "Hannah?" Grace's voice cracked as she leapt from her chair. Her mother grasped her hand, careful not to touch the burns. Tears poured down her cheeks. "Oh, thank God, you're awake." Hannah tried to speak, but her throat was raw, her voice barely a whisper. "Mom, my baby?" Grace's lips trembled. She turned to the nurse, who stepped forward with a gentle smile. "The baby is alive, strong heartbeat. Your little one's a fighter, just like you." Relief washed over Hannah, and for a fleeting second she closed her eyes, clutching the thought of her unborn child like a lifeline. But then, memories came rushing back. The heat of the fire, the crushing pain, and Lisa's hand pushing her forward. Her eyes widened in horror. "Lisa, she did this." Grace's face hardened. "We know, sweetheart. The police are investigating. David and Carlos are working to bring her down." But Hannah's gaze drifted past her mother, landing on Michael. He stood near the window, his shoulders slumped, his eyes red from sleepless nights. The moment their eyes met, he stepped closer, his voice trembling. "Hannah, I'm so sorry." She studied him, confusion swirling with suspicion. You knew her. You let her near us. Why?" Michael's throat tightened. He wanted to lie, to shield her, but the weight of truth pressed down until he could no longer resist. "There was a time, before the pregnancy, when I was weak. I made a mistake with Lisa. But it ended. I swear it ended. I never imagined she would go this far." The words stabbed deeper than the fire ever had. Hannah's breath hitched, tears burning her eyes. "So it's true. The whispers, the looks, it was all true." Michael reached for her hand, but she pulled away, the pain in her body nothing compared to the agony in her heart. "How could you?" she whispered. "While I carried your child, you carried her lies. You betrayed us." He fell to his knees beside her bed, his voice breaking. "I was a fool, Hannah. I thought I could bury the mistake, but it's you. It's always been you. Please, please don't give up on us." Her tears spilled freely, soaking the pillow beneath her. Grace turned away, unable to bear the sight of her daughter's heart shattering. David stood in the doorway, his fists clenched, his jaw tight. Hannah closed her eyes, her voice weak but sharp. "Save your apologies, Michael. Save them for a woman who isn't burned alive because of your silence." The room fell silent, heavy with grief and betrayal. And as Hannah drifted back into exhausted sleep, one truth seared deeper than her burns. Her body could heal, but her heart might never trust again. By morning, the hospital was surrounded. Reporters lined the sidewalks, their cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward as though chasing blood. News vans clogged the street, and headlines rolled non-stop across every screen. Whitmore gala ends in tragedy. Pregnant wife burned during bizarre fire ritual. Whitmore family silent on incident. Clips from the night had already gone viral. Videos showed Hannah falling into the fire, Michael diving after her, David pointing a sword at Lisa. Millions watched and replayed, each angle dissected, each scream echoing through social media feeds. Inside the hospital, Grace closed the blinds of Hannah's room, shielding her daughter from the outside world. But there was no shielding the family from the storm brewing beyond the walls. Meanwhile, across town, Lisa sat in a luxury hotel suite, a glass of champagne in hand. Her crimson gown had been replaced with a soft cream dress, her hair styled into loose waves. She looked less like a woman accused and more like a grieving angel rehearsing for sympathy. A television crew prepared their cameras. "Are you ready, Miss Hart?" the interviewer asked softly. Lisa dabbed her eyes with a tissue, forcing her voice to tremble. "Yes, I just want people to know the truth." The red light blinked. The camera rolled. Lisa began, her tone fragile yet calculated. "What happened at the gala was a tragedy. I loved Hannah like a sister. I would never hurt her. She stumbled, she lost her balance. I tried to save her, but it all happened so fast." Tears glistened as she looked down, then up again, her voice breaking. "I only wish I could have done more. My heart aches for her and the baby. Please pray for them." The interviewer nodded sympathetically. "There are rumors, though, about your relationship with Mr. Whitmore." Lisa pressed a hand to her chest, feigning shock. "Michael and I are friends, nothing more. People see us together and create stories. Hannah has always been sensitive, emotional. She was under pressure, pregnant, and well, you saw how she was at the gala. She looked fragile. I fear stress may have caused her accident." Her crocodile tears fell right on cue. The interview ended, and within hours, clips flooded the internet. Headlines twisted in her favor. "Lisa Hart speaks out. I tried to save Hannah." Is stress to blame for pregnant wife's collapse? Michael Whitmore's two women, the untold story. In the hospital waiting room, David slammed his fist against the wall as he watched the broadcast. She's turning the whole world against Hannah. Michael's face hardened, guilt and fury mixing in his eyes. This is exactly what she wants, to make Hannah look weak, unstable, and to protect herself. Grace stood, her voice trembling but strong. Then fight back. Show them who Hannah really is. Don't let that viper rewrite her story. Carlos entered with a folder of evidence, his expression grim. We have proof, footage, witnesses, payments. But the court of public opinion moves faster than the law. If Lisa controls the narrative, by the time trial begins, Hannah will already be the villain. Michael clenched his fists, finally breaking his silence. Then we take the truth public. No more hiding. No more lies. And for the first time, Michael understood. The fight to save Hannah wasn't only in the hospital. It was in the eyes of the entire world. The Whitmore boardroom was usually a place of power. Long mahogany tables, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, polished suits debating millions. But tonight the air was thick with something far heavier than business. It was judgment. Michael stood at the head of the table, his tie loosened, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Across from him sat Grace and Tom, Hannah's parents, their faces etched with grief and fury. David leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his expression sharp as a blade. Evelyn and Richard, Michael's parents, sat stiffly, their pride barely masking their shame. Carlos placed a folder of evidence on the table, watching in silence. Michael cleared his throat, but his voice cracked. I've called you all here because the truth can't stay buried any longer. Lisa has twisted the story. She's trying to make Hannah look weak, unstable, careless. But we all know the truth. She was the one who pushed Hannah, and she must pay. Tom slammed his fist against the table. And what about you? You think you're just an innocent bystander in all of this? If you hadn't betrayed my daughter, Lisa would never have had a reason to destroy her. Michael's shoulders sagged under the weight of guilt. You're right. I failed Hannah. I failed our marriage. I failed all of you. But I swear I will spend the rest of my life making it right. Grace's voice trembled with fury. Do you have any idea what it's like to watch your daughter, 6 months pregnant, lying in a hospital bed covered in burns? To hear her whisper that you betrayed her while she fights to keep your child alive? Your silence almost killed her as much as Lisa did. Tears welled in Michael's eyes. He bowed his head. I know, and that's why I'm not hiding anymore. Tomorrow morning, I'm holding a press conference. I'll admit everything. My mistake, my weakness, my affair with Lisa. I'll apologize to Hannah in front of the world. If I lose everything, so be it. But I won't let Hannah carry the shame Lisa is trying to put on her. The room fell silent. Evelyn gasped softly, her pride crumbling. Michael, if you go public, our family name? David cut her off, his voice sharp. Your family name? Hannah almost lost her life. The truth is the only thing that matters now. Richard sighed heavily, pinching the bridge of his nose. If this is your choice, Michael, then you'd better be prepared for war. Lisa will drag every detail into the light. The press will devour you. Michael straightened, his voice steady for the first time in days. Let them. If destroying me is what it takes to clear Hannah's name, then I welcome it. Carlos slid the folder toward him. Then we use this. Evidence, witnesses, payments, everything that proves Lisa's intent. Combined with your public confession, the narrative changes. It won't be easy, but truth never is. Michael looked around the room, meeting the eyes of Hannah's parents, of David, of his own ashamed mother and father. I can't undo the past, but I can fight for her now. And in that moment, for the first time since the fire, Michael chose Hannah, not his reputation, not his empire, but the woman he had almost lost forever. The city awoke to headlines louder than any morning alarm. Screens blazed with breaking news. Michael Whitmore confesses affair, exposes lover's role in gala tragedy. Evidence emerges. Surveillance shows Lisa Hart pushing pregnant wife into fire. From socialite to suspect, the fall of Lisa Hart. Clips of Michael's public apology flooded the airwaves. His voice had trembled as he admitted his betrayal, but his words were clear. Lisa Hart had deliberately endangered Hannah's life. For once, the billionaire wasn't hiding behind lawyers or money. He was a man stripped bare, begging the world to see his wife's truth. In her luxury suite, Lisa watched the broadcast with fury burning in her eyes. She hurled her champagne glass across the room, shards scattering across the floor. How dare he? How dare he throw me to the wolves after everything we shared? Her phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from reporters, sponsors, so-called friends desperate for statements. But she ignored them all. Instead, she called her attorney. They have nothing, just shaky footage. It won't hold in court. But she was wrong. Across town, Carlos stood before detectives, presenting the folder of evidence. The surveillance footage showed it frame by frame. Lisa tightening her grip on Hannah's wrist, the subtle shove forward, her calculated retreat as the fire consumed Hannah's dress. Added to this were witness testimonies from staff who admitted Lisa bribed them to cheer Hannah onto the stage. Financial records traced the payments directly back to Lisa's accounts. "This is enough to charge her," the lead detective said grimly. By afternoon, 2 police cars pulled up in front of Lisa's hotel. Officers strode into the lobby, their presence drawing the attention of every camera in the area. Guests whispered as Lisa, draped in designer silk, descended the staircase with a practiced smile. "Miss Hart," an officer said firmly, "you're under arrest for attempted murder, aggravated assault, and reckless endangerment of a pregnant woman." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters shoved forward, cameras flashing like lightning. Lisa's smile faltered for the first time. "You can't be serious. This is a mistake. I'm the victim here." The officer snapped handcuffs around her wrists. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say." "No," Lisa shrieked, twisting against their grip. "He loves me. Michael loves me. This is her fault. Hannah's fault. She ruined everything." The cameras devoured her breakdown. Within minutes, social media lit up with the footage. Lisa screaming as officers dragged her out of the hotel, her mask of elegance shattering before the world. At the hospital, David watched the news clip with grim satisfaction. "Finally," he muttered, "she's getting what she deserves." Grace wept softly, both from relief and exhaustion. Tom squeezed her hand. "Justice is coming." Michael stood silently at Hannah's bedside, holding her unburned hand. Her face was still pale, her body wrapped in bandages, but when her eyelids fluttered, he whispered, "She can't hurt you anymore. I promise." But Hannah's lips barely moved, her whisper cutting through the fragile peace. "The burns will heal, but the betrayal remains." And though Lisa was in handcuffs, the true trial was only beginning, not in court, but in Hannah's heart. Night fell over the hospital, the city lights flickering faintly beyond the window. Inside Hannah's room, the air was heavy with antiseptic and sorrow. Machines beeped steadily, reminding everyone she was alive, but only barely. Grace dozed fitfully in a chair, her rosary slipping from her tired fingers. Tom sat with his head in his hands, exhaustion pulling him into silence. Michael leaned forward at Hannah's bedside, his hand clutching hers as though sheer force could keep her tethered to the world. David stood near the door, a silent guard who refused to leave. But in the stillness of night, Hannah's mind drifted into a place darker than the burns that ravaged her body. The pain was everywhere. Her skin felt like it was on fire, every breath a knife in her chest. She tried to shift slightly, but agony shot through her, pulling a muffled cry from her lips. Michael instantly leaned closer. "I'm here, Hannah. I'm right here." She opened her eyes halfway, meeting his. They were red and swollen from tears. He looked broken, desperate. And yet all she could see was Lisa's face, smiling as Michael looked away that night. Her voice was raw, weak, but sharp. Why wasn't I enough?" Michael's heart shattered. He pressed his forehead against her hand. "You are enough. You've always been enough. I was weak, I was blind, and I hate myself for it. Please believe me, I would trade everything to take back what I did." Tears spilled down Hannah's cheeks, mingling with the sweat on her burned skin. "You broke me, Michael. Not just my body, my soul. How can I bring a child into this world when his father betrayed his mother?" Michael's sobs filled the room. He kissed her bandaged hand, even as she pulled it weakly away. "Because I'll spend the rest of my life proving you can trust me again. Because that child deserves the mother who fought through fire to protect him. And he deserves a father who finally learned what it means to love." Her eyes closed, his words too heavy for her shattered heart. Darkness tugged at her, whispering that it would be easier to let go, to slip away and end the pain. For a moment, she wanted it. She wanted silence, peace, release. Then, faint but undeniable, a flutter in her belly. The baby kicked. Her eyes snapped open, tears flooding them. She pressed her trembling hand to her stomach. The life inside her fought to survive, fought to stay with her. And in that moment, Hannah realized she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for him. She turned her face toward Michael, her voice a hoarse whisper. "If I stay, it's for my child, not for you." Michael nodded, his tears falling onto her blanket. "Then let me fight for both of you, even if you never forgive me." Hannah closed her eyes again, exhaustion dragging her down. But for the first time since the fire, she clung to a fragile thread of hope, the tiny heartbeat within her, the reason to endure one more night. And in the darkest hour, Hannah made her choice, not to give in to despair, but to fight, if only for the life she carried inside her. The first light of dawn filtered through the hospital blinds, casting pale stripes across Hannah's room. The night had been brutal, filled with pain, whispered prayers, and tears. But the morning carried a fragile promise. Hannah had survived another night. Michael sat at her bedside, his suit rumpled, his eyes swollen from weeping. He hadn't left her side, not even for a moment. When Grace stirred awake, she found him holding Hannah's bandaged hand, whispering quietly to the unborn child. "You saved her," Grace said softly, though her tone carried no warmth. "But don't think for one second that makes up for what you've done." Michael nodded. "I know. I don't expect forgiveness. But I'm not leaving Hannah. Not now. Not ever again." Later that morning, David stormed into the room, his eyes narrowed. "Talk is cheap, Michael. You've already proven how weak your words are. If you want me to believe you, prove it with actions." Michael stood, his voice firm though his body trembled. "Then watch me." His first step was simple but symbolic. He tore up his gala itinerary, the endless meetings, the conferences, the flights, all canceled. Every ounce of his time now belonged to Hannah. He replaced his corporate calendar with hospital rounds, therapy appointments, and burn consultations. The second step was harder. He sat with Carlos, drafting legal papers that stripped Lisa of every possible claim. He cut ties with every associate connected to her. "Freeze her out completely," Michael ordered. "Financially, socially, legally, she'll never come near Hannah again." The third step was humbling. Michael approached Tom, who had barely spoken to him since the fire. He bowed his head. "Teach me how to care for her. You've been her protector longer than I have. I need to learn." Tom's jaw clenched, his anger simmering. But finally, he sighed. "You want to learn? Then start small." That evening, Tom showed Michael how to hold a cup so Hannah could sip water without straining. Grace guided his hands as he gently dabbed ointment on her burns. David watched, arms crossed, waiting for him to falter, but Michael's hands were steady, his patience unwavering. Hannah, still weak, opened her eyes to see him bending over her, his once manicured fingers trembling as he unwrapped and rewrapped her bandages. For a moment, she didn't see the billionaire everyone admired. She saw a man stripped bare, desperate, trying. "You don't have to do this," she whispered, her voice faint. Michael met her gaze. "I do. Because for too long I let others care for you while I chased pride and temptation. I'm done being that man. I want to earn my place beside you again, even if it takes the rest of my life." Tears slid down Hannah's cheeks. She turned her face away, not ready to forgive, but unable to ignore the change in him. As the day ended, Michael sat by her bed, his hand on her stomach, whispering softly to their unborn child. "I don't deserve her forgiveness yet. But I swear, little one, I'll never let either of you down again." And for the first time since the fire, his vow felt less like words and more like the beginning of redemption. The hospital corridor was quiet in the late evening. Most visitors had gone home, and the hum of machines was the only sound that broke the silence. Inside Hannah's room, the glow of monitors cast soft light over her sleeping form. Her bandages were fresh, her breathing steadier than the night before. David stood by the window, his arms crossed, his eyes never straying far from his sister. He had been her protector since childhood, the one who shielded her from bullies, the one who worked 2 jobs so she could finish college. And now, seeing her broken body lying in a hospital bed, rage burned through him like wildfire. Michael entered quietly, holding a tray of soup the nurse had given him. He set it on the table, his movements cautious, almost hesitant. David's eyes followed him like a hawk. "You think carrying soup makes you a husband again?" David said flatly. Michael took a slow breath. "No, I think standing by her every day, proving myself one act at a time, might someday make me worthy again." David stepped closer, his voice sharp. "You had one job: protect her. Instead, you let temptation blind you. You let a snake into her life, and now look at her." He gestured toward Hannah, his voice cracking. "She trusted you with everything, and you broke her." Michael's shoulders sagged, guilt pressing him down. "I know, I can't undo what I did, but I can choose who I am now. And right now, I choose to fight for her, even if she never forgives me." David studied him, searching for cracks, for signs of weakness. For years, he had distrusted men like Michael, powerful, charming, always thinking they could buy their way out of mistakes. But this version of Michael looked different, stripped of arrogance, raw with remorse. "You'll forgive me if I don't believe words," David muttered. Michael nodded. "Then watch my actions." The next day, Hannah stirred awake, groaning softly as pain rippled through her body. David immediately rushed to her side, holding her hand gently. "I'm here, sis. You're safe." She blinked, her lips curving into the faintest smile. "You always are." Michael stepped forward with the soup, offering it carefully. "Do you think you could eat a little?" Her eyes flickered between them, the brother who had never failed her and the husband who had nearly destroyed her. She hesitated, then nodded faintly. Michael spooned the broth gently to her lips, his hands steady, his eyes fixed on hers. David watched closely, arms crossed, every muscle tense. When Hannah finally swallowed, Michael let out a shaky breath of relief. Afterward, David pulled Michael aside into the hallway. His voice was low but firm. "You did one thing right today. Don't think that makes you redeemed. You'll earn my trust only if Hannah can smile again because of you. Until then, I'm her shield. You slip once and I'll make sure you never get near her again." Michael met his gaze without flinching. "Fair. Then let me prove myself brother to brother for her sake." David's eyes narrowed, but for the first time he didn't push him away. And in that fragile truce, Hannah's future hung between a brother's loyalty and a husband's redemption. The courthouse steps were a battlefield of cameras and microphones. Reporters swarmed like vultures, shouting questions, their flashes blinding. Is Lisa Hart guilty of attempted murder? Will Michael Whitmore testify against his former lover? The scandal had become the trial of the year. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. The gallery was packed. Journalists, curious citizens, even rivals from high society eager to watch the Whitmores unravel. At the front, Hannah's family sat together. Grace clutched her rosary, Tom sat stiff with rage, and David leaned forward, his glare locked on the defense table. There sat Lisa, her crimson hair tied back neatly, a cream suit chosen to project innocence. She smiled faintly at the cameras, as if she were the victim of cruel misunderstanding. Her attorney whispered in her ear while she dabbed imaginary tears with a silk handkerchief. The judge entered, the gavel striking wood. Court is now in session. Case of the state versus Lisa Hart. The prosecutor rose first, his voice firm. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, tonight you will see undeniable evidence. Surveillance footage, financial records, and witness testimony, all proving that Lisa Hart intentionally pushed Hannah Whitmore, a pregnant woman, into burning coals. This was not an accident. This was attempted murder." Lisa's attorney stood next, smooth and rehearsed. "My client is a victim of circumstances. She had no reason to harm Hannah. The tragedy at the gala was nothing more than a terrible accident. We will show that Hannah's own instability and stress led to her fall." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Grace gripped Tom's arm, her face pale with fury. The first piece of evidence was shown on a large screen, the slowed surveillance footage. The jury leaned forward, watching Lisa's hand tighten around Hannah's wrist, the push, the stumble, the flames. Lisa's attorney objected, claiming the angle was misleading, but the judge allowed it. Next came testimony. A stagehand nervously admitted Lisa had bribed him. "She told me to encourage the crowd, to make sure Hannah walked across the fire. She said it would be unforgettable." The gallery erupted in whispers. Lisa's face twitched, but she quickly composed herself. Then Michael was called to the stand. The room hushed. He adjusted his tie, his voice low but steady. "Yes, I made a mistake. I had an affair with Lisa, but I ended it when I realized the truth of who she was. At the gala, I saw her push my wife. She nearly killed Hannah and our child. I will never forgive myself for letting her near us." Lisa leapt to her feet, shouting, "He's lying. He loved me. He told me Hannah was nothing." The judge slammed the gavel. "Order in the court." But the damage was done. The jury's faces hardened, sympathy draining away. David clenched his fists, whispering to himself, "Finally, justice." As the prosecutor closed, his words struck like a hammer. Lisa Hart thought she could manipulate love, wealth, and reputation, but the truth is fire, and tonight it is burned through her lies. And as the gavel struck in, Lisa realized her empire of deceit was crumbling, piece by piece. The trial had shaken the city, but the real battle for Michael wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the hospital. Beside the woman who had every right to hate him, yet still carried his child beneath her scarred skin. A week after testifying, Michael called a press conference, not to defend his reputation, but to bury it, if that's what it took. The ballroom where he once celebrated wealth and power was transformed into a somber stage. Reporters filled every chair, their pens poised like daggers, cameras pointed like rifles. Michael stepped up to the podium, his usual confidence stripped away. He wasn't in a tailored tuxedo tonight, but in a simple dark suit. No entourage, no handlers. Just a man who had lost nearly everything and was determined to win back what truly mattered. He began quietly, his voice shaking. "For years, I cared more about my image than the truth. I lived for power, success, admiration. And in the process, I lost sight of the only person who ever truly loved me, my wife Hannah." The room fell silent. Reporters leaned in, the weight of his words pulling them closer. "I betrayed her," Michael continued, his throat tightening. "I betrayed our vows. I thought I could keep that sin hidden, but secrets always surface. And when they did, Hannah paid the price. She was the one dragged into fire, burned, humiliated, left fighting for her life, because of my weakness." Cameras flashed, but he didn't look away. "I am not asking for your sympathy. I am asking for your prayers. For Hannah, for our unborn child. And I am promising this. From this moment on, every breath I take will be spent protecting them, honoring them, and proving I can be the man they deserve." He paused, emotion breaking his voice. "If my empire crumbles, so be it. If my name is dragged through mud, so be it. Hannah is my family, she is my life, and I will not fail her again." The press erupted with questions, but Michael raised his hand, signaling he had one more thing to say. "To every woman who has been betrayed, doubted, or silenced, Hannah's story is yours too. And to every man who thinks silence will protect the people you love, learn from me. Silence destroys. Truth saves. Don't wait until the flames take everything before you learn what truly matters." With that, he stepped away, ignoring the chaos of shouted questions. Back at the hospital, the conference streamed live on television. Grace sat by Hannah's bed, watching intently. David crossed his arms, skeptical but listening. Hannah stirred, her eyes fluttering open just enough to catch her husband's voice echoing from the screen. She saw not the arrogant billionaire she once knew, but a man stripped of pride, kneeling before the world with nothing but raw truth. Her eyes filled with tears. Michael's voice cracked through the speakers. "Hannah, if you can hear me, I love you. I will spend my life proving it." And though Hannah said nothing, her tears told the room one thing. Michael's redemption had begun to reach her heart. The hospital recovery ward was quieter now. The chaos of sirens, the noise of press outside, even the constant stream of doctors had slowed. Hannah had survived multiple surgeries, and though her body was still wrapped in bandages, she was finally stable enough to receive visitors beyond her parents and Michael. Grace sat by her daughter's bed, spooning broth slowly to her lips. Hannah grimaced at the taste but swallowed anyway. "Good girl," Grace whispered, brushing her hair gently. Tom stood nearby, one hand on his wife's shoulder, the other clenching and unclenching as though holding back years of frustration. The door creaked open. Evelyn and Richard entered, their presence stiff, almost unwelcome. Evelyn clutched a bouquet of lilies, her face pale with guilt. Richard's jaw was set, his posture rigid, but his eyes betrayed shame. Grace immediately stiffened. "You've got some nerve showing up here after everything." Evelyn's voice cracked as she set the flowers on the table. "I came to apologize. I failed as a mother-in-law. I worried about appearances while your daughter was drowning in pain. I should have seen Lisa for what she was." Tom crossed his arms. "Words are cheap." Richard stepped forward, his deep voice carrying weight. Then let me add more than words. I've already instructed our foundation to cover every cent of Hannah's medical expenses. Beyond that, we're setting up a permanent trust in her name, dedicated to victims of domestic and public violence. Her suffering will not be in vain. Grace's eyes softened slightly, though her voice remained firm. Money doesn't heal betrayal. My daughter's wounds aren't just on her skin, they're in her heart. At that moment, Hannah stirred weakly, her voice rasping. Mom, let them speak. Everyone turned. Hannah's eyes fluttered open, glazed with exhaustion but filled with quiet strength. She looked at Evelyn, then Richard. You can't undo what's been done, but maybe we can stop more women from suffering like me. Evelyn's tears spilled. She reached for Hannah's hand but stopped halfway, afraid to touch. I don't expect forgiveness, but I swear, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure your name means more than scandal. It will mean survival, hope. David entered then, his eyes narrowing as he saw Evelyn at Hannah's side. But Hannah lifted a trembling hand toward him. It's okay, David. We can't live in war forever. Reluctantly, David nodded, though his gaze never softened. I'll tolerate them, Hannah, for you. But the moment they slip back into their pride, I'll be the first to remind them who nearly cost you everything. Michael, who had stood silently in the corner, finally spoke. This isn't about Whitmores versus Millers anymore. This is about Hannah. And from now on, everything we do, every decision we make, must be to protect her and our child. Grace looked at him long and hard. For the first time, she didn't see only betrayal in his face. She saw exhaustion, regret, and the spark of real change. The room fell into a fragile silence, heavy but not hopeless. And in that silence, two families who once clashed began to see a future bound not by scandal but by Hannah's strength. The hospital room had begun to feel like a second home. The steady beep of monitors, the quiet shuffle of nurses, the smell of antiseptic, it was all Hannah had known for weeks. She had endured surgeries, skin grafts, endless treatments. But as her body fought to heal, her pregnancy grew heavier, more complicated. Late one evening, as rain battered against the window, Hannah suddenly cried out, clutching her belly. Grace rushed to her side. Hannah, what is it? Tears streaked Hannah's pale face. It hurts. The baby, something's wrong. Within seconds, alarms blared. Nurses flooded the room, checking monitors, calling for the doctor. Michael, who had been dozing in the corner, leapt to his feet, panic surging through him. What's happening? The doctor burst in, his expression grave. She's having premature contractions. We need to stabilize her immediately. If we can't, both mother and child are at risk. Grace sobbed, clutching Tom's arm. David's fists clenched as though he could fight the crisis with sheer force of will. Michael's knees nearly gave out. He pressed his hands to the glass as the team surrounded Hannah, attaching IV drips, administering medication, checking fetal monitors. Inside, Hannah gritted her teeth, every contraction a wave of agony. She clutched her belly, whispering desperately, "Stay with me, little one. Please, don't give up now." The fetal heart monitor dipped suddenly, its steady rhythm faltering. A nurse shouted, heart rate dropping. Michael pounded on the glass. Save them both. His voice cracked, desperate. David grabbed his arm, pulling him back. Don't get in their way. Trust them. For once in your life, you can't control this with money or power. Michael collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. If I lose them, I'll have nothing left. Inside the room, the doctor barked orders. Increase fluids. Prepare for emergency C-section if we can't stabilize in the next 5 minutes. Grace covered her mouth with trembling hands. Tom wrapped an arm around her, whispering prayers through gritted teeth. David stood rigid, his jaw locked, his fury at the world boiling over. Then, faintly, the monitor steadied. The baby's heart rate rose, though still fragile. The contractions slowed, though Hannah remained weak, drenched in sweat. The doctor finally stepped out, removing his mask. We managed to stabilize them. But Hannah's pregnancy is now high risk. From this moment forward, she must remain under constant monitoring. No stress, no strain. One wrong move and we could lose them both. The family exhaled, relief mixing with fear. Grace fell into a chair, sobbing in gratitude. Michael clasped the doctor's hand, his own trembling. Thank you for saving them. But the warning echoed in everyone's mind. Inside the room, Hannah turned her head toward the window, her voice hoarse but steady. If I have to fight every second until he's born, I will. My son will live. Michael pressed his palm to the glass, tears streaming. "And I'll fight with you, Hannah, every step." Yet beneath the relief, one truth lingered. Hannah's road to motherhood would be carved through fire and pain, and the battle had only just begun. The hospital clock ticked past midnight when Hannah's cries pierced the quiet ward. Nurses rushed to her side, their calm urgency slicing through the tension. Michael jolted awake from the chair beside her bed, his heart lurching into his throat. "Contractions are back, fast and strong," a nurse reported. "She's going into labor. She's only 34 weeks. Michael's chest tightened. Too soon. Far too soon. Doctors swarmed in, wheeling Hannah's bed toward the delivery room. Grace clung to her daughter's hand until the last possible second. "You fight, Hannah. Do you hear me? You fight for that baby." Tom wrapped his arms around his wife as she sobbed, whispering, "She's strong. She'll make it." David followed the gurney until the staff blocked him at the doors. "I'll be right here, sis," he shouted. His voice cracked, but his eyes blazed with determination. Inside the delivery room, the air was thick with urgency. Machines beeped wildly, monitors flickering red. Hannah writhed in pain, sweat streaming down her face. "Please, save my baby," she gasped. Michael clutched her hand, his own tears spilling freely. "You're not alone, Hannah. I'm here. I won't let go." The doctor's voice cut through the chaos. "Her blood pressure's dropping. Fetal distress. Prepare for emergency C-section." The words slammed into Michael like a hammer. He shook his head in disbelief. No, you can't take her from me." The doctor's eyes were grim. "If we don't move now, we could lose both mother and child." Michael bent over Hannah, pressing his forehead to hers. "Listen to me," he whispered, choking back sobs. "You've walked through fire. You've carried our child through hell itself. You can do this. You will do this. And I'll be right here, no matter what happens." Tears slid down Hannah's cheeks. She whispered one word. "Promise. I promise," he said. The room exploded into motion. Nurses prepped surgical tools, anesthesiologists adjusted oxygen, the doctor scrubbed in. Michael was forced to step back, watching through a haze of panic as they cut swiftly, working to deliver the baby before it was too late. Then, a cry. A sharp, piercing wail filled the room. The baby's voice cut through the fear like sunlight through storm clouds. Michael's knees buckled as he sobbed with relief. "My son," he whispered. The nurse lifted the tiny, fragile infant, his skin wrinkled, his cry weak but determined. Premature but breathing. She placed the baby in an incubator, attaching monitors, ensuring stability. Michael pressed his hand to the glass of the incubator, tears streaming. "Welcome to the world, little one. You're stronger than both of us." But his joy turned to terror as he looked back at Hannah. Her face was pale, her body limp. The doctor barked orders. "We're losing her. Blood pressure crashing." Michael's world tilted. He stumbled to her side, grabbing her hand. "No, Hannah, stay with me. Don't leave me now. Please, we need you. Your son needs you." The room pulsed with alarms, doctors working frantically. And as her baby's cries echoed in the background, Hannah's eyes fluttered open for one fleeting moment. She looked at Michael, whispered, "Protect him," and slipped into unconsciousness. The baby lived, but Hannah's life still hung by a thread. For 2 days after the birth, the hospital was a battlefield between life and death. Hannah lay unconscious, her body fragile after the grueling delivery and months of pain. The baby rested in the neonatal ward, his tiny body wrapped in tubes and wires, fighting to breathe on his own. Michael split his time between them, torn but unwavering, refusing to sleep. Grace never left her daughter's side, whispering prayers over every shallow breath. David stood guard at the door, daring anyone, press, strangers, even extended family, to disturb her rest. Tom walked the halls endlessly, pacing like a lion in a cage. Then, on the third morning, a sound broke the stillness. "Hannah?" Her voice was weak, but it was there. Hannah's eyelids fluttered open, her gaze unfocused at first, then slowly sharpening. Michael leapt from his chair, gripping her hand. "I'm here. You made it. You both made it." Grace wept openly, kissing her daughter's forehead. "My brave girl, you came back to us." Hannah's lips trembled. "The baby?" Michael guided her gaze to the glass window of the neonatal ward. Inside, their tiny son stirred, his chest rising and falling beneath the protective machines. He's small but strong, just like his mother. Tears filled Hannah's eyes, a soft smile touched her lips for the first time in months. "My miracle." News of her survival spread quickly, and with it, justice followed. The court ruled swiftly after the mountain of evidence presented by Carlos. Lisa Hart was sentenced to years in prison for attempted murder. Her name dragged through every headline not as a glamorous socialite, but as a predator consumed by jealousy. Her fall was complete. The same cameras that once adored her now captured her in handcuffs, her screams drowned by the roar of public disgust. Michael watched the broadcast with Hannah, holding her gently as she leaned against him. "It's over," he whispered. "She can't hurt you anymore." But Hannah's eyes were steady. "The scars she left aren't just on my skin. They'll never fade completely." Michael's heart ached, but he nodded. "Then let me spend the rest of my life helping you carry them." Weeks passed, and slowly Hannah's strength returned. With therapy, she learned to walk again, her burns healing inch by inch. Each day, Michael was at her side, changing bandages, rocking the baby, cooking simple meals. David softened, grudgingly acknowledging that Michael's actions matched his words. Grace and Tom saw their daughter's laughter slowly return, fragile but real. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Hannah sat in the hospital garden, her son in her arms. Michael knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "I don't expect forgiveness today," he said softly, "or tomorrow. But I'll never stop proving that I love you, Hannah. You are my heart. You are my family, and if you'll let me, I'll spend my life protecting that." Hannah looked down at their child, then at the man who had broken her but was slowly learning to rebuild. Her eyes filled with tears, not of despair, but of release. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Then protect us, Michael. Always." And with their baby's cry echoing into the evening, the Whitmore family was reborn, not in wealth, but in love, scars, and unshakable hope. So the story has come to an end. My wonderful friends, are you still here with me right now? If you are, it means something in Hannah's journey has touched your heart in a way words can't explain. Maybe it reminded you of love, of betrayal, of second chances, or maybe of your own quiet battles. Life can burn us, but like Marcus Aurelius once said, what stands in the way becomes the way. Pain can break us, but it can also rebuild us if we let it. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a like, subscribe to our channel, and help us tell more stories that heal, inspire, and remind us that even in the darkest fire, love and resilience shine through.